Okay, I'm just going to do a quick little talk on process I use for slotting things. Most of my knives are takedown, not a secret, and I surface grind my knife such that from the sides, the ricasso out to the tang, is one continual thickness. It's perfectly flat. I want a large surface area to be my reference point. So I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is here. I really don't. I haven't measured it yet. Let's just say it's 250 thousandths. It's a 1/4 inch. Well, it's a 1/4 inch back here too. It's 250 thousandths all the way back here. So with that in mind, I do not, here's going to be my guard, right? And this is a chunk for the spacer. I don't back cut the sides of my ricasso. I've never found that necessary to get a good fit, nor do I find it beneficial in any way. So I don't do that. When I create my materials for my hardware, I surface grind the two sides, right? So that they're parallel, because I surface grind one, flip it over, surface grind the other. And when I do the final surface grind, of course here, I don't know if you can tell, it was surface ground exactly like that. Well, on the other side, I turn it. Here's my scratches are going like this. So that way when I scribe a line, it's easier to see because I'm scribing at a tangent to the surface grind marks. It's hard to see a scratch if it's going with the grinding mark. So I turn it a little bit and then do it that way. Anyway, I'll surface grind the two sides, and then I stand this thing up and clamp it to some precision 1, 2, 3 blocks, so that when I surface grind, because I want a perfect rectangle this way, as well as when I stand it up, I want the cross section to be a perfect rectangle as well. I want 4 90-degree corners. I need this surface to be at a 90 degree to the two sides, and I don't want a parallelogram, so that when I lay it in the mill vise and I slot my slot, the slot is not, you know, it's not going off on a tangent, because these two sides are going to be in the mill vise, right? So you get what I'm saying. I don't want my slot to be off on a tangent like this. I need it to be perfectly perpendicular to the two faces. Otherwise, when it would butt up against the guard shoulders, it would be sitting cockeyed. So 4 90-degree corners. We want a rectangle. Now what I'm going to, here's the slot. Let's say this, and I'm holding the camera in my offhand, so let's not get this. This is going to be the actual slot. And this is 200. Let's say it's 250 thousandths. Okay, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch end mill, and I'm going to create in my material an 1/8 inch. It's probably a little bigger in comparison to the slot. And I'm going to create a slot right down the center of that piece, 1/8 of an inch. Now, if I take, which is 125 thousandths, if I take that, and that 1/8 inch end mill is going to be 125 thousandths. If I take that 125, subtract it from 250, I end up with another 125. Divide by 2 is 62.5. So I need 62.5 thousandths there and 62.5 thousandths there. So I put a dial indicator up against the table on my end mill, and I just keep going back and forth until I go each side of center 62.5 thousandths, and I end up with 250 thousandths, and pretty much go over to the knife and tap it on. I don't want to just get close and then do a bunch of file work and fit work and tap and try and blah blah blah. What a waste of time that is. If you've got a mill and a dial indicator, just mill your slot to fit and go over and tap it on, and it is not much more complex than that. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing next, is slotting this guard to fit that knife, and I'll try, maybe even try to show you some real-time fit time. Now let's not forget, I mill my guard shoulders on my mill with a stop on the mill, so these are perfectly in line, and this is an 1/8 inch radius. On the top and the bottom I have an 1/8 inch radius, so when I get this slotted, about all I really have to do is, a lot of you guys looking at this will know what I mean. I've got to round over, I will round over the slot in the guard basically to meet that, and it's almost just a tap-on friction fit. Okay, until later. There's something I do when I'm doing these flat kind of guards that are like that. I do not center the guard on the ricasso because that just looks goofy. What I try to like to do is have the same amount of guard material above the spine as is hanging below the cutting edge. Now this is a little bit large, so there will be some height length removal on this piece, but I like to, if you can kind of look at it, you kind of see that, God, I hate that light. The guard is basically standing above the spine about the same amount as it is hanging below the cutting edge. If it was centered, if it was centered on the ricasso, that guard would be way up here, and I think that looks ridiculous. Just an opinion. Okay, I just measured my knife, and it is 256 thousandths. 256 thousandths thick. My actual 1/8 inch end mills, which mathematically is 0.125, are, by the time they machine the flutes, I think in the end mill, I calculate them as 0.123. Okay, so I've got I need a 256 thousandths slot. Now come over here, and we're going to see that I have milled a slot in here with my 1/8 inch end mill, which is 0.123 thick. So that slot is 0.123. If I remove from that 256 thousandths slot and I remove 123 thousandths, that means I still have 133 thousandths of material I need to remove. Divide that by 2, that means I got to go 66.5 thousandths each side of that slot, and I will have a slot 256 thousandths wide. This was taught to me by Jerry Radis somewhere around 1998. So I've been doing, and the first thing I did, not the first thing, but maybe shortly after he did that, I went and bought this benchtop mill. I have been using this mill in my shop for, my God, almost 18 years, 19 years. I've used this Grizzly benchtop mill. How many slots I've milled with that slot, I have no idea. But what I can tell you is the number of slots for guards I have slotted for knives could almost be counted on both my hands. First thing I did right out of the chute in going into knife making, there's my coffee, is get a mill. Variable speed, high-low, and then sometime later I got bigger mill that does more substantial work because I do a lot of other machining as well. But that said, I still use that mill on every knife I make. That's how I drill my my assembly pins, my alignment pins and so forth are done on that small mill. And I get, and other stuff. But anyway, so, and it's cold. So what I do now, I milled that slot in the guard, which is kind of hard to see because of reflection, but I milled that slot, and now I've set a dial indicator on against the table at 0. So essentially what I'm going to end up doing is going either side. I need to loosen that. I'm going to end up going either side of 0. What did I say it was? 62.5 thousandths that way and 62.5 thousandths that way. And I'll have a slot 256 thousandths wide. So, and I'll just do that. I'll go one side to 0, 4 or 5 thousandths, make a pass down the length of the slot, then go to the other side, and 10 and 10, and keep creeping and creeping a few thousandths at a time until eventually I end up at 62, and I think it was 62.5 thousandths, something like that, and I'll have a slot walk over to the knife and basically just kind of tap it on. So anyway, that's what I'm going to end up doing. I hope all that made sense. Actually 66.5 thousandths, I was wrong. So I always just measure twice, cut once, right? So it was 256 thousandths minus 123 thousandths divided by 2 equals 66.5. That's the number I'm looking for to get that slot. 66.5. Have a good one. I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, here's my guard slot. 66.5 thousandths, and it took exactly 4.5 minutes to slot that. Okay, and I know that it's perpendicular to the material, and the sides are parallel because the sides of my knife are surface ground, so they're parallel. The sides of the slot are parallel, and I marked my top and bottom, and it's milled. I couldn't do better than that by hand. It's impossible to do anything better than that by hand. You might get close to as good, but it would take you much longer, and this is a better precision fit. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is a bunch of, even the last ½ inch there, this tang is as forged, right? So, and I forge in the curve on my tang, but what I need to do now, I don't need all this here anymore, because I leave a little extra tang there for tongs when I'm hardening and so forth. So now what I need to do is get rid of the tang here that I don't need, such that what I'm going to leave on the guard, or on the tang, I'm sorry, full width is everything up to and including just the hardware. So that's all I need, full width and full thickness. And I'm just going to clean a bunch of this up. I'm going to end up cutting this off. I'll have a finial coming in through the butt cap, and my finial is going to be 1 inch long. You know, I need to cut a ½ inch or so off of this tang. It doesn't need to be needed on there, and I'm going to taper it down. And here's another thing I'm going to do. I'm going to take this guard, or this tang, once I get it cut off the length and some of the excess material removed, I'm going to lock that on my surface grinder like this, with the blade sticking right out from the surface grinder, and I'm going to I'm going to surface grind off just 1 or 2 thousandths off of each side of the tang, because I just don't need it, and I don't need to fight with it. All I want to fit is just this last ½ inch of tang. So I'm going to remove some material and thin it just a couple thousandths so I can slide that guard on and see where I am. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, this is the tang, just right off the grinder. I cut a little off for length that I don't need, and basically ground off some of the excess, and you can see that I left enough meat to go about full thickness and full width through about 2/3 of the spacer, and then I reduced it so I'll still have plenty of meat in the handle material up here. I don't want the hole in the handle material to be full thickness of this, so I reduce it about 2/3 of the way through the spacer so I can get some extra meat in the handle. Hope that makes sense to you. And this is I forge in the curve on the tang on my knives when I'm forging the blade. So that's right. I did a pretty good job on this one. Now I'm going to go in and flop this down on the surface grinder and just take a few thousandths on each side of the tang. Get it out of the equation.